An arrogant billionaire slapped a pregnant nurse and smiled. He had no idea that one moment would destroy his entire empire. Watch till the end. This gets insane. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. And comment below, where are you watching from? The hospital didn't sound like a hospital. It sounded like silence wrapped in money, soft footsteps. Echoed across polished marble floors. Machines hummed gently behind closed doors. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something far more expansive: control, precision, power. This wasn't a place for chaos. This was a place where the elite came to be treated like they were untouchable. And in the middle of it all, she moved quietly, carefully, a nurse in a crisp uniform, one hand resting almost instinctively on the gentle curve of her stomach. She was tired. Onion, paying attention, could see it, but she carried herself with a calm that refused to break. Her voice, when she spoke to patients, was soft, steady, reassuring, the kind of voice people trusted without question. She didn't demand respect. She earned it. Take a deep breath, she said gently to an elderly patient, adjusting his blanket with care. You're going to be okay. And for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should, until the doors opened, not quietly, not respectfully. They swung open with force. The sound alone turned heads. He walked in like the building belonged to him. Expensive suit, sharp shoes striking the floor with purpose, a phone pressed to his ear, his voice loud enough to dominate the room without effort. Behind him, assistants scrambled, trying to keep up, trying not to fall behind the gravity of his presence. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Calm replaced with tension because everyone knew who he was. Power didn't just follow him, it obeyed him. I don't care what they said, he snapped into the phone. If I want it done today, it gets done today. His eyes barely registered the people around him. Patients, staff, none of them mattered. Not here, not to him. Until she stepped forward. Not aggressively, not arrogantly, just doing her job, sir, she said politely, her voice calm but firm. I'm going to need you to wait for a moment. We have protocols. He stopped, slowly, turned, and for the first time he actually looked at her, not as a person, not as an inconvenience. Do you know who you're talking to? He asked, his voice low. Dangerous. The room tightened. She didn't step back. I understand, sir, she replied gently, but everyone here is treated in order. It won't take long. There it was. Respect without submission, and that was something he wasn't used to. A faint laugh escaped him, sharp and mocking. In order, he repeated. You think I stand in line like everyone else? A few people nearby lowered their eyes. No one spoke. No one moved, but she stayed where she was, calm, grounded. Yes, sir, she said softly. That's how we ensure everyone is cared for safely. For a second, it looked like he might let it go, like logic might win. But then his expression hardened. Something darker slipped through. People like you, he said, his voice rising just enough to cut through the room, should learn your place before opening your mouth. The words landed heavy, cruel, unnecessary. Still she didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't break, and maybe that was what pushed him over the edge, because the next moment happened too fast for anyone to stop. A sharp sound cracked through the silence, his hands striking her face. The impact echoed, loud, violent, unforgivable. The room froze, completely. A doctor mid-step stopped moving. A patient gasped under their breath. A tray slipped from someone's hand in the distance, clattering faintly against the floor. But no one spoke. No one dared. She stumbled just slightly, her body shifting under the force, her balance catching at the last second. One hand instinctively wrapped around her stomach, protective, steadying, holding onto something far more important than the pain burning across her cheek. She didn't fall. She refused to. Slowly, she straightened, her face turned slightly from the impact, a faint mark already beginning to show. But her eyes didn't break. They held something stronger than anger, stronger than humiliation, something deeper, something murderous in its silence. And he saw it, for a second, but he didn't understand it. He smirked instead. Actually smiled, like it meant nothing, like she meant nothing. A short laugh escaped him as he adjusted his sleeve, completely unbothered by the shock he had just left behind. Next time, he said coldly, think before you speak. And just like that he turned, walked away, his footsteps echoing. Again, confident, untouched, untouchable. The room remained frozen. Long after he disappeared, no one rushed to speak. No one knew what to say because something had just happened that wasn't supposed to happen in a place like this. Power had crossed a line, and no one had stopped it. She stood there quietly, one hand still resting over her stomach, the other hanging by her side, her face calm, but her silence louder than anything in the room. Because what no one there understood, what no one could possibly see in that moment, was that this wasn't the end of the story. This wasn't even the beginning of justice. Because somewhere, far beyond that polished hallway, a storm had just been set in motion, and what no one in that room knew was that this quiet moment of humiliation was about to shake the entire nation. For a moment after he left, no one moved. Then the room exhaled all at once. "Nurse, are you okay?" A doctor rushed forward, his voice low but urgent. Another nurse reached for her arm, eyes wide with disbelief. "Sit down, please. You shouldn't be standing." But she gently pulled her arm back. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That was the part that unsettled them the most. A faint red mark still lingered on her cheek, but she didn't touch it. We didn't acknowledge it. Her hand remained where it had been since the moment of impact, resting protectively over her stomach, steady, grounded, as if reminding herself what mattered. "This needs to be reported," someone whispered sharply. "We can't just let this go." "Yes, we can't. This is assault," another added, glancing nervously toward the hallway he had disappeared into. But even as the words were spoken, hesitation crept in. A silence layered beneath the urgency, because everyone knew exactly who he was, and more importantly, what he could do. "He's not just some rich man," a senior staff member muttered, lowering his voice. "He's connected, powerful. People who go against him don't just lose jobs, they disappear from careers." The weight of that reality settled quickly, heavy, uncomfortable, and suddenly, what felt like a clear line of right and wrong became something blurred, something dangerous. "We should at least inform management," someone suggested, quieter now. That idea traveled fast, safer, contained, controlled, within minutes. The incident moved from shock to procedure, behind closed doors, out of sight. Management gathered, voices hushed but tense. Words like reputation, liability, and donor relations floated through the room, each one carrying more weight than the one before. "This cannot escalate," one administrator said firmly. "Not without consideration." "Consideration," another replied, almost incredulous. "He assaulted a staff member, and he is also responsible for funding half of this wing." Came the cold response. Silence again. Different this time. Not shock. Calculation. "We will handle this internally," the administrator continued, discreetly. And just like that, the truth began to shrink, to fold into something smaller, something easier to ignore. Out in the hallway, life tried to resume. Machines hummed again. Conversations restarted, quieter than before. But the tension didn't leave. It lingered in glances, in unfinished sentences, in the way people avoided saying what they were really thinking. And in the middle of it all, she kept working, like nothing had happened. She checked charts, adjusted for lines, spoke to patients with the same calm tone she always had. If anyone hadn't witnessed it themselves, they might have believed the incident was, exaggerated, but it wasn't, and neither was the strength it took for her to keep going. "You should take a break," the colleague urged softly, walking beside her. "At least sit down for a few minutes." She shook her head gently. "There are patients waiting," she replied. That was it. No anger, no tears, no tease, no demand for justice, just quiet focus. But beneath that calm there was something else, something unspoken. Because this wasn't just about pride or dignity, there was a reason she refused to break, a reason she refused to react, as if she understood something the rest of them didn't, as if she knew this moment wasn't hers to escalate. Not yet. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, he laughed, actually laughed. "You should have seen her face," he said casually, leaning back as his assistants hovered nearby, like she couldn't believe someone would put her in her place. A few forced smiles followed. No one dared disagree. "People like her," he continued, adjusting his cufflinks, his tone dripping with dismissal, "forget where they stand." It's almost amusing. His words carried no regret, no hesitation, only entitlement. To him it was already over, a forgettable moment, but for everyone else, it was becoming something else entirely, because whispers had started quiet at first, then louder. "Did you hear what happened in the main wing? They're saying he hit her." In front of everyone, a junior staff member lingered near a corner, phone held low, recording softly as fragments of conversation unfolded. Not the slap itself, but everything after. The tension, the fear, the silence. Proof that something wasn't right. The kind of proof that doesn't stay hidden for long. Messages began circulating internally. Screens lit up with speculation. Names were mentioned carefully but often enough. And still officially nothing had happened. No report, no statement, no accountability. Just silence. Manufactured, maintained, but cracks were forming. Because no matter how powerful someone is, truth has a way of moving. Quietly at first, then all at once. She finished her shift the same way she started it. Calm, composed, walking down the same polished hallway where everything had changed. But this time people looked at her differently, not with pity, with something closer to respect. Because she hadn't fought back, she hadn't raised her voice, she had simply endured. And somehow that felt louder than anything he had done. But as the hospital tried to bury the incident, as silence wrapped itself tighter around the truth, one small action had already slipped through the cracks. A message. sent quietly, deliberately, to someone far beyond those walls. Someone who didn't operate on fear. Someone who didn't forget. And as that message traveled, carrying with it more than just words, it carried consequence. Because while the billionaire believed the moment was beneath him, what he didn't realize was that it had already reached someone far more powerful than he could ever imagine. Asterisk, it didn't explode all at once. It started with a single upload, a shaky clip, dim lighting, fragments of voices layered with tension. Not the slap itself, but the aftermath, the silence, the fear, the way people spoke when they thought no one powerful was listening. At first it barely registered. A few views, a few comments, then someone recognized the setting, then someone recognized the name, and within hours everything changed. The video spread fast, faster than anyone inside that hospital could control. Shared once, then 100 times, then thousands. By morning, it was everywhere, on every platform, on every screen. Did you see this? Is this real? Who is that man? The questions turned into outrage, and outrage turned into a storm. Millions watched the moment again and again, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet in all the wrong ways. The hesitation, the whispers, the fear woven into every second. People didn't just see what happened. They felt what wasn't said, and that made it worse. Hashtags began to rise, first locally, then nationally, then globally. Names started trending. Clips were dissected frame by frame. Voices grew louder. This isn't just about one incident. This is what power looks like when no one challenges it. But not everyone agreed. Because as fast as outrage spread, so did defense. He's built industries, created jobs. You don't destroy a man over one moment. We don't even have the full story. People are too quick to judge success. Debates erupted across timelines, two sides forming almost instantly, one demanding accountability, the other protecting power. And right in the center of it all was her, but she said nothing, no statement, no interview, no emotional response, just silence. And that silence made people lean in closer. Why isn't she speaking? Is she being silenced? Or does she know something we don't? The questions multiplied. Curiosity deepened. Because in a world where everyone rushed to speak, her quiet felt intentional, calculated, powerful in a way no one expected. Meanwhile, inside a glass-walled office high above the city, he watched it unfold. At first with indifference. "It'll pass," he said dismissively, tossing his phone onto the table. "It always does." But it didn't. If anything, it intensified. More clips surfaced. More voices joined in. Media outlets picked it up. Headlines sharpened. And suddenly ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. So he responded. Not with apology. Not with reflection. With control. The statement was released within hours. Cold, precise, detached. A misunderstanding has been taken out of context and amplified unfairly. We respect all individuals and deny any intentional wrongdoing. No emotion, no accountability, just strategy. But instead of calming the storm, it fed it. Because people weren't just reacting to the incident anymore. They were reacting to the response, and it felt exactly like what they feared. Dismissive, untouchable, above consequence. Then came the second move. Legal threats. Quiet at first, then louder. Warnings sent to the hospital. Pressure applied behind the scenes. Take the content down. Control your staff. Correct the narrative. His message was clear. Power wasn't just something he had, it was something he used. Freely, carelessly. And the more he pushed, the more people resisted. Because now it wasn't just about a nerve, it was about something bigger, something deeper, something that hit, a nerve people had been holding for a long time. And while the world argued, she stayed the same. She went to work, finished her shifts, spoke to patients, helped those in pain, as if none of it existed, as if the noise outside those walls had nothing to do with her. Reporters tried to reach her, messages flooded in, requests for interviews, offers for exclusive statements, but every attempt met the same response. Nothing, no comment, no reaction, just silence. And some of that silence grew louder than every headline combined, because the more people looked into her, with a stranger it became. No social media, no digital footprint, no interviews, no public history. It was as if she existed only in that hospital, and nowhere else. Journalists began digging deeper, asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why does no one know anything about her? And then something else surfaced, something subtle, but impossible to ignore. The way hospital executives spoke to her, careful, measured, respectful, in a way that didn't match her position. Not fear, not exactly, with something close to awareness, as if they knew something and were choosing not to say it. That detail didn't go unnoticed. It spread quietly, then quickly, fuel for speculation, fuel for curiosity, fuel for something bigger than the original story. Because now the narrative was shifting. from what happened to who she really was. And somewhere from cameras and headlines, someone watched it all unfold. Silently, patiently, not reacting, not interfering, just observing. Every detail, every move, every mistake, waiting. Because, while the world focused on noise, that silence meant something. It meant preparation. Because while the billionaire was busy controlling the narrative, someone else was preparing to destroy it completely. The brother no one expected. The announcement came without warning. No leaks, no speculation, no build-up. Just a single notification that cut through the noise, dominating every screen. A press conference scheduled immediately. Location, central, hype, impossible to ignore at first. People assumed it was him. Damage control. An attempt to finally take control of a narrative that it had clearly slipped beyond his reach. Media outlets rushed to cover it. Cameras were set. Analysts prepared statements before anything had even been said. Because in moments like this, Powell didn't wait. It responded, and everyone expected the same pattern. A carefully crafted apology, a controlled explanation, another attempt to minimize what the world had already seen. The room filled quickly. Journalists packed shoulder to shoulder. Voices overlapping. Questions already forming before answers existed. Lights brightened the stage. Microphones stood ready. Anticipation built. Because whether people supported him or not, they were watching, waiting, and then movement. Not from him, from someone else. A figure stepped forward. Not with urgency, not with pressure, but with complete control over every step he took. His presence didn't demand attention. It commanded it. The room shifted instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, eyes locked in place, because this wasn't who they expected, not even close. He stood at the podium.com/composed, unshakable, no assistants rushing behind him. No visible signs of pressure, just quiet authority that filled the space without effort. For a brief second, confusion spread. Who is that? Is he representing the hospital? No, that doesn't make sense. Then the introduction came. Clear, direct, and impossible too. Misinterpret. He is here today as the brother of the nurse involved in the incident. Silence. Not the kind that comes from hesitation. The kind that comes from impact. Because everything changed in that moment. The story wasn't just about a nurse anymore. And it definitely wasn't under the billionaire's control. Not anymore. The man didn't rush to speak. He let the silence settle. Let the weight of that revelation sink into every person in the room. Then calmly he looked up and began. My sister, he said, his voice steady, measured, has spent her life caring for people who often have no one else. No anger, no raised tone, just truth. And in return, he continued, she was met with something that should never be defended, excused, or ignored. Every word landed with precision. Not emotional, not reactive. Certain. Behind him a screen flickered to life. The footage began to play. Not fragments, not blurred clips. The full sequence. Uncut. Unfiltered. The moment leading up to it. The words, the tone, the shift in energy, and then the slap. This time, no one looked away. No one debated context. No one questioned what they were seeing, because now there was nothing left to interpret, only truth. When it ended, the room remained still, heavy, uncomfortable, final. He stepped forward again, closer to the microphone, closer to the moment no one could escape. And then he said it. You didn't just slap a nurse, pause. Not for effect, for certainty. You've exposed who you really are. The sentence didn't echo. It settled deep. Permanent. And for the first time since this began, the balance shifted. Completely. Across the city, across the country, across every screen still streaming that moment live. People felt it. That unmistakable turn. Where power stops protecting itself and starts collapsing. Because somewhere, watching just like everyone else, he saw it too. A billionaire. Sitting in a room that suddenly felt smaller than it had hours ago. The confidence that once defined him cracked, not visibly, not completely, but enough. Enough for doubts to enter. Enough for control to slip. Phones began to ring. Messages flooded in. Not of support. Of distance. Let's wait before we comment. We need to reassess our position. This situation is evolving. The language was careful, but the meaning was clear. Allies were stepping back. Not loudly but deliberately. And in a world built on influencer was everything. Back in the press room, questions erupted louder, now sharper, no longer defensive, demanding what actions will follow. Are there legal steps being taken? Was the hospital pressured to stay silent? But he didn't rush to answer it because he didn't need to. The shift had already happened. Outside, the reaction was instant, explosive. The internet didn't debate anymore. It decided. Clips of the statement spread faster than anything before it. The quote repeated everywhere, shared, reposted, amplified. You didn't just slap a nurse, you exposed who you really are. It became more than a sentence, it became a verdict. Public opinion locked into place, not divided, unified, and for the first time since the video its story belonged to someone else. But even as it felt like everything had already changed, even as the billionaire's world began to close in around him, there was one truth still waiting beneath the surface. Because moments like this don't end with exposure, they begin with it. And just when he thought the worst had passed, the real consequences were only beginning. The fall of arrogance, it didn't collapse in a single moment. It unraveled thread by thread. The first cracks appeared quietly: legal notices, internal reviews, statements carefully worded but impossible to ignore. Then came the investigations, not just into that day, but into everything that came before it. Stories began to surface, at first anonymously, then with names. Voices that had stayed silent for years started speaking, one after another, each carrying the same path: intimidation, humiliation, different places, different times, the same man, the same arrogance. I thought no one would believe me. I was told to stay quiet. I was afraid of what he could do. Now they weren't afraid anymore, because the illusion had already been broken, and once that happens, it doesn't go back. Media outlets that once praised him now dissected him. Headlines shifted from admiration to accountability. Every past interview, every public appearance, every carefully crafted imagery examined under a different light. And it didn't look the same. It looked manufactured, fragile, temporary, business. Partners began to step away, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. Meetings were cancelled, contracts paused, statements released that used words like concern and alignment while quietly creating distance. Stocks responded, the only way they could. They fell fast enough to be noticed, slow enough to feel like a drawn-out consequence. And for the first time in a long time, he couldn't control it, because this wasn't about one decision. It was about a pattern the world could finally see. Public disgrace followed, not loud, not chaotic, but absolute, the kind that doesn't need shouting because everyone already understands. Legal consequences moved in the background, investigations deepening, possibilities turning into probabilities. Whether immediate or inevitable, one thing became clear: he was no longer untouchable. The man who once walked into rooms expecting silence now faced something else entirely: distance, isolation, then the uncomfortable reality of being seen exactly as he was, while his world narrowed. Hers expanded, but not in the way people expected. No grand interviews, no emotional breakdowns, no attempt to claim attention. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to accuse, it was to remind. "I didn't stay silent because I was weak," she said, her voice calm, steady, unchanged. "I stayed silent because I believed the truth didn't need noise to be heard." People listened, not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. "Respect isn't something you give based on status," she continued. "It's something you show because someone is human. No anger, no bitterness, just clarity, and some hope that made it stronger beside her." He stood not in front, not speaking over her, just present the same calm control he had shown from the beginning, because this was never about revenge. It was about balance, about making sure something wrong didn't stay protected when he did speak. It was brief, measured, double quotes. This was never about power, he said. It was about responsibility. Nothing more, nothing less. And that was enough, because the message had already landed beyond them. The impact spread. Hospitals began reviewing internal policies. Protocols changed. Conversations that once stayed behind closed doors moved into the open. Discussions about power, accountability, and dignity filled spaces that had long avoided them. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was a shift. And shifts don't happen loudly, they happen when people decide something is no longer acceptable. Days later, the hospital felt different. The same polished raw floors, the same quiet hum of machines. But something had changed, something deeper than structure, something you couldn't see, but could feel. She walked down the same corridor where it had all happened, the same place where silence once protected the wrong person. Her steps were steady, unhurried, not because she had forgotten, but because she didn't need to carry it the same way anymore. People looked at her as she passed, not with pity, not even with sympathy, with respect, real respect, the kind that isn't given out of fear, but out of understanding. She paused for a moment, just briefly, in the exact spot where everything had shifted, then continued forward, not because she had won, but because she had never needed to fight the way they expected her to. Because in the end, power doesn't define you. The way you treat the powerless does.